Good afternoon, friends. Traditional briefing on the fakes and propaganda of the aggressor state. It displays itself most cynically during the celebration of May the 9th and puts the most false messages and narratives about the war in Ukraine into the mouths of the Russian leadership. In particular, during the parade, Putin stated that the military operation, as they call it, began because of Ukraine's alleged intention to attack Crimea, which he said in his speech, I quote, "The Donbass militiamen and Russian army soldiers are fighting on their own land." Well, first of all, it is not their own land, it is the territory of Ukraine, which was recognized by the world community and by Russia itself during the conclusion of the Great Treaty over a quarter of a century ago. Another quote, Russia called on the West for an honest dialogue, but NATO countries did not want to hear it. Preparations were being made for the attack on Crimea. This is a lie. Ukraine never planned an attack on Crimea, but preferred a diplomatic solution to this conflict, the annexation that was carried out by Russia in 2014. Moreover, Russian state officials were making preparations for this fake narrative as part of Victory Day, even days before the celebration. In particular, the Speaker of the Russian State Duma had already put a message in his statements about the alleged attack that Ukraine was planning against Russia. Quote, Volodin, our soldiers and officers prevented a huge tragedy. NATO was preparing Ukraine to attack our country, Russia's state-run channel Rossiya 24 reported. Ukraine has never planned an attack on Russian territory. This is not true. At the same time, Russia's top government officials have thrown in another fake about Poland's alleged intention to take control of Ukraine's territory, including its western regions. This statement was issued on behalf of Russia's deputy chairman of the Security Council, former president of Russian Federation Dmitry Medvedev. Western Ukraine will be a welcome acquisition for Poland, which is hungry to return these lands, of course under the veil of beautiful words about eternal brotherhood. The uncomplaining Ukrainian neighbor will do anything for the sake of an illusory dream of a happy life under the umbrella of the European Union, Medvedev said. His rhetoric is noteworthy because aggressive language is used not only against NATO, but also against the European Union, in relation to which so far there was no such vocabulary. This indicates that Russia is genuinely afraid of Ukraine's European prospects and EU candidate status that we expect this summer, and this status will show that other neighbors who refuse to work with Russia in the same geopolitical framework are able to achieve new European perspectives and to become members of the European Union in the future. Meanwhile, Russian propagandists themselves are screwing up. In particular, it is about the fate of one of the servicemen who died on the cruiser Moscow. The Russian propagandists themselves are in conflict with each other, in particular about the answer from the Russian prosecutor's office, which was received by the father of the victim. The Russian prosecutor's office told the victim's father that their son had disappeared in an unknown direction and was accordingly declared missing in a military unit. After that, the Russian propagandists themselves began to accuse their own Russian prosecutor's office of treating this sailor's grief inhumanly. Accordingly, this once again indicates that Russia itself is not ready to admit its own crimes, but at the same time ready to glorify those who took part in the war against Ukraine, which had no justification. Well, what are the problems with mathematics in Russian propaganda? Well-known Russian propagandist Vitaly Kots once again cannot count all Ukrainian Bayraktar drones. So, on May the 7th, he provided a fresh summary on the island Zmyiny, Snake Island. 2 Bayraktar drones were shot down. Let me remind you that in March, Russian propagandists reported that they had destroyed all but 1 Ukrainian Bayraktar drones. After that, the beating of Ukrainian Bayraktar drones over the territory of Russia and over the island of Zmyiny was reported several more times. And that's not all. The same Kots reports the downing of another Ukrainian Bayraktar near Odessa. If they destroyed 35 of the 36 Bayraktars back in March, where do all these reports come from? Of course, they are based on the lies propagated by Russia by reporting false information about their own losses. Let me remind you that Russia has not yet declared losses in the war against Ukraine and lie about the losses suffered by Ukraine defending its land. There was also another fake about combat drugs allegedly used by Ukrainian servicemen. Russia's state-run propaganda resource RIA Novosti says it is allegedly found that combat drugs produced in secret laboratories set up by the Pentagon or the State Department of the United States. According to the propaganda video, biological drugs were produced for Ukrainian soldiers there. At the same time, the Russians themselves are constantly confused whether these laboratories were created for the development of chemical weapons or for combat drugs. At the same time, Russian scientists themselves reported that Ukraine does not produce any biological or chemical weapons, and this is a lie spread by top politicians in the Russian Federation. And the last message, which is already on the verge of cynism, and the completely destroyed Mariupol, ruined by the Russian army during 2.5 months, they held solemn events on the occasion of the so-called Victory Day. Just think about what they write on their state propaganda resource Russia Today. A 300-meter St. George ribbon was unfurled in the liberated Mariupol today. Well, first of all, Mariupol was not liberated by anyone, it was occupied and destroyed by the Russian army. Secondly, to celebrate this day on the ruins, unfolding a 300-meter St. George's Lind, it indicates the absolute absence of any sense of proportion, a sense of humanity, but just a desire to continue to promote their propaganda rhetoric. The city of Mariupol is probably the last thing that now needs this 300-meter St. George's ribbon, not to mention that the events in the city are a war crime, for which sooner or later the leadership of the aggressor state will have to answer. Don't trust Russian state propagandists, trust the Ukrainian media, the Ukrainian political leadership and the armed forces of Ukraine.